All right, thank you all so much for joining us today. Once again, I'm Marie Francis, Senior Director of Product Marketing at Schedulo, and today we have our CEO and co-founder, Matt Fairhurst, who is going to talk to us about the customer experience and the future of work. And through Schedulo, Matt has helped more than 100 companies think differently and approach differently how they manage their on-site customer service and mobile workers. He founded the company in 2013 in Brisbane, Australia, and we've since grown to more than 100 people in Australia, Vietnam, the US, and the UK. But before we get started with Matt, I just want to walk us through a few quick housekeeping notes. First of all, this session will be recorded, and if you are feeling social and want to, which we hope you do, and want to discuss what you're hearing here or anything about Schedulo, please feel free to tweet us, mention us on LinkedIn, use the hashtag Schedulo. And if you have questions pertaining to the presentation itself, please use the Q&A box on your left, and we will actually be happy to take your questions as they come. We want to make this as interactive as possible, so please go ahead and ask questions as they arise. Don't wait to the end. And without further ado, I'm happy to hand it over to Matt.
Thanks, Marie. I appreciate that, and thank you to everybody on the call and those that have joined the webinar. I really appreciate your time. I know it's precious, so we won't keep you any longer than what we've indicated. But it's a pleasure to be talking about this topic. I've spoken on this topic before at events and at other places, but it's a pleasure to be talking to you all today, and we think about I guess the future of work, both for the workforce, but also your customers as service-driven organizations, and how the customer experience and changing customer expectations is really modeling and changing the way that service organizations manage work and interact with customers in the field. Like me, I'm sure that no one here is really foreign to the concepts and the change that has been driven through leading B2C online organizations like Amazon and Netflix, for example, completely changing the way that industries deliver content, service customers, deliver goods and materials. I myself have ordered many meals on Postmates, and it's changed the way that I've interacted with mealtime, and I'm sure that everyone on this call can have or can share similar experiences in the way that's changing their expectations as consumers. And I think what's really interesting with the businesses that we've worked with, and certainly field-based service organizations today that we've experienced, three common trends are often talked about and discussed as they think about their customer base and their stakeholders and who they're trying to connect with and service. There's changing expectations as these new models of service interaction are coming to the fore. Things like respecting their time and making sure that we're respectful of people's time and energy and interactions that they have with organizations, the level of responsiveness that we have as companies as we service those customers, and our ability to relentlessly deliver. There's many interactions and many touch points as companies interact with people and humans and our customers, and it's so important that not one of those interactions slip. They all have to be relentlessly at a high quality, and that's certainly an expectation that has been around for a long time, but is certainly amplified with new ways of delivering service in the field. I think the other really interesting trend is that mobile work will continue to dominate the way that services are delivered. By 2020, over 100 million people in the US will be delivering work in some way away from the office and away from the desk, either moving from place to place or delivering services remotely. Under 10 million of those fit into the traditional field service category, where they're fixing heavy machinery and industrial equipment. And I think it's important for us to think about the way that the other 90 million people are delivering services out in the field in healthcare and financial services and all these other industries that have either delivered work in that way for a long time or are totally new models of service and business as technology helps equip people in the field to a far greater degree. I think the flip side of when we think about the future of work is that 50% of the US workforce in the same time period will be millennials, people that have grown up like me with the internet and technology and cell phones and things like that at their fingertips. what are their expectations and experiences, and how does technology change the way that they expect to interact with not only their customers from an empowering point of view, but also the businesses they work for and the stakeholders they work with. What are those expectations, and how do those two expectations meet in the middle, the changing expectations and requirements of your customer and the changing expectations and the requirement of the workforce generally. With all of this, one of the challenges for companies that schedule work in the field, performing these activities and managing the workforce and scheduling work as it happens was really difficult, and it always has been. The logistics of managing work and people is always a challenging process, and that challenge is certainly compounded and amplified with these changing expectations, both from the workforce as it changes and customer expectations. Customers are certainly expecting to be interacted with in a much more real-time manner, and it really highlights when systems and processes are broken, whether it's scheduling or the actual execution of work in the field. No longer can appointments be missed. No longer can we send people to the wrong place at the wrong time or completely mismatch customer expectations and needs as to who should be there in order to deliver a service. And, I think that the expectations are really high now, and the bar is incredibly high, and you need to really start thinking about the technology that you need to use as sort of mobile work continues to dominate and those expectations are changing. In order to, I guess, cast the theme of this presentation, which is sort of managing the customer experience in the future of work, we're going to look at the four fundamental phases and elements of the journey of work as it gets requested and then finally performed and completed in the field. And across those four moments, how does the connectivity between customers, scheduling, and the mobile workforce, how can that be used to really meet the expectations of our customers? It's a really important process to consider in your own business. And one of the things that we've found over the last 4 years working in this industry is that no two customers are the same. Often business processes change and there are definite unique characteristics. So use these four key moments as a fundamental framework, but certainly think about the way that they might apply to your own way of delivering service and organizing people in the field and how that can relate to your own customer experiences.
So, Matt, before we move on, actually, we got a really interesting question I would like for us to jump on before you continue.
Yeah.
And so this person writes that the number one obviously service is very important, but the number one thing that their customers care about is price. And so are we going to speak to that? And, what about, this future of work? How do you keep prices down, and how does that factor into this picture?
Yeah, that's a good question, something that we think a lot about here at Scheduler, and obviously our customers think a lot about. Delivering service in the field with people moving around to get things done, as necessary as it is, can often be quite expensive. You are dealing with a fairly significant, in many cases, sometimes even the majority of the cost within an organization. And how you pass that cost down to your customers, I guess, is ultimately up to you. But one thing that technology can do, and certainly these days, and this has changed, I think, over the last 5 to 10 years, is technology and applications like Scheduler have certainly given organizations the ability to reduce costs, not only through the optimization and efficiency improvements and reductions in things like travel time and making sure that you service a customer once or you're really on point in that regard. But technology really can help an organization when it comes to the overall cost and the total cost of service delivery. How you choose to pass that down to your customers, I think, is largely dependent on your business model and up to you. But I think some of the things to think about is, could you interact with your customers in a far greater way, and think of maybe more of the softer metrics over and above price, like customer satisfaction and customer retention. As industries become more competitive, and I'm sure that you're all in really competitive environments, it's important to look at the data as you use technology and manage your workforce to really think about some of the flow-on effects that can help you not only save money, but also make more money through retention as well, and the quality of your service delivery. But good question. Thanks very much for whoever sent that through.
Thanks, Matt.
So just to jump in, we're going to look at, as I said, those 4 elements of the journey of work. And the first one that we like to think about is what we call the first moment of service. This is that initial interaction that you have with your customer or with a stakeholder. Some of the organizations that we work with, the work that's being scheduled and managed is internal. So it could be an internal customer within your organization as well. But fundamentally, work is always generated from some kind of moment, whether that's an automated process out of something being sold or a service request coming through, or in healthcare's example, maybe management of a care plan and the constant delivery against those in a recurring way. But there's always some initiating driver. And when you're interacting with a stakeholder, and particularly with a customer, this is your first opportunity to think about those 3 key drivers that we've recognized, thinking about responsiveness and the relentless delivery of great customer service, and importantly, I think, being really mindful of their time. How can you give information to them during that first moment that's really informative and accelerates the process of them understanding when you can deliver a service, how you're going to deliver it, and it really starts to set the scene of that first interaction and the continued interaction that you're going to have with your customers. If you think about the mobile workforce during this moment as well, the data that you collect through this initial interaction is super important, so that you don't have to go back and continually request information, so that you're building an entire picture of your customer. How can you connect details from a CRM or some other initiating service to really build out that profile and picture of not only what needs to be done, but the picture of the customer as well? And I think that really flows on to our second step, which is the scheduling and assignment of work. And to be clear, a lot of the organizations that we work with can perform these first 2 steps in tandem. Sometimes, and depending on your business model and the way that you schedule and assign work, you can actually move through not only the first interaction and the gathering of requirements and that first involvement that you have with that initiation of work and your customer, but you can schedule and assign work there and then. If you have tools that give you instant visibility around the availability of your workforce, the capacity of your team, the time at which someone can be there on site, and matching skills and abilities and that kind of thing, often you can perform both in the same interaction, which obviously for certain business types can be an amazing interaction for that customer to get a really informative view of when you're going to deliver a service and how. Again, making sure that you collect correct and accurate information about the customer and what needs to be done, but also thinking about the ways to automate and accelerate how you can schedule work. What are the important decision factors that a human would typically go through as they decide, across the workforce pool, who should be assigned that work? And sometimes this is a very complex marrying of both internal business drivers and some of those efficiencies that we talked about with price, like travel time, skills and abilities. Maybe it's the type of worker that needs to be assigned. Is it a contractor or a full-time worker or a casual worker in your team? And how does that impact the internal costs and efficiencies that your business is focused on? Marrying that with these changing expectations of the customer, how do you really align and think about not only internal pressures but the needs of the customer? Do they have a relationship with someone in your organization, and are they expecting that relationship to continue? Are there certain skills and abilities and preferences that that customer has in terms of the type of person that they're going to interact with and who's going to perform that work? For the mobile workforce, again, they're going to need as much information as possible once that job is pushed down to them to ensure that all of the information about the customer and the customer's profile is totally connected and seamlessly available to them by the time they get work done. And during this process, it's important that you collect all of those constraints, variables, and information about the customer.
Matt, before you move on, you had mentioned, we got a question, since you had mentioned contractors. About half of our technicians are contractors or subcontractors. So how do you get them all in the same system? How does that work?
Yeah, that's a really good question. It's quite a challenging paradigm to think about. On the one hand, business models are changing. The type of and the makeup of a workforce in a lot of industries is changing as well. we're seeing a greater blend of not only full-time employees, but also part-time employees and contractors and casual workers. Sometimes this is because of geographic distribution, and as companies are growing and expanding, it's maybe not the best strategy to employ full-time workers in an area, and you can actually involve contractors or casual and part-time workers in a more on-demand model as required. And these kind of blended workforces do get difficult to manage. On the one hand, it's great when you have a full-time or even a part-time workforce and you have total visibility and control over the availability and the schedule of that workforce, and therefore a greater ability to control and manipulate it. But on the other hand, when you're working with contractors, that level of insight is somewhat more opaque. And using technology to choose and marry and align the difference between a full-time worker and the information you have about them and the visibility you have in them with a potentially more opaque relationship you have with the contractor is really important to understand, and technology can help you get there. Importantly, I think, though, if you're delivering a service to a customer, and we're specifically talking about the customer journey today, it's important that your workforce, regardless of whether it's a contractor or a casual worker or a full-time worker, have the same information or very close to and the same technology used to get work done. If you're looking to achieve a really consistent model of customer service quality and delivery, it's an important thing to think about, making sure that everyone in your workforce have the same tools and technology, and importantly, customer information available to them. But it's certainly a challenge when you work with blended workforce models.
Thank you, Matt.
Absolutely. So back to the journey, we're now sort of at the third step in that process, and we're thinking about the real-time job execution in the field now. So the work has been initiated by our customer, our stakeholder. We've had that interaction, and hopefully it's a really high-quality one where you're able to communicate with them and maybe even schedule and assign the work and let them know exactly when you're going to be there. And now this is the greatest opportunity to deliver a really amazing interaction with your customers. This is your first time, potentially, or maybe on a recurring basis, a continued experience for the customer as they meet the people that are representing your brand in the field and representing your service. And, it's important, I think, to highlight here that sometimes things do go wrong. Traffic and other implications around people getting sick or their unavailability for whatever reason, a disruption in service. These things happen in the real world, and it's important to acknowledge that. For your customers, the expectation is a really transparent and communicative way of dealing with those exceptions. How can you make sure that technology supports a really efficient and visible and transparent way of communicating with your customers when things do go wrong? And dealing with those exceptions is really important. How can you sort of deliver on those promises that you set during that first moment of service and provide real-time visibility to your schedulers and your mobile workforce so that communication between those two entities is really, really clear and connected? For the mobile workforce, again, making sure that technology helps, not hinders, and sort of steps out of the way of delivering great service. At the end of the day, technology is great at equipping and enabling companies to do things better and people to do things better in the workforce. But often these employees and the workforce are trained very specifically and highly skilled to deliver the services that you need to. Let's make sure that they have all of the time dedicated with their customer to deliver against those skills and those capabilities they have, and they're not spending hours and hours dealing with poor technology or paperwork and all of these disconnected systems. Let's get that out of their head and allow them to focus on the actual job that they're there to do.
We've got one more question. I'll try to paraphrase this a bit. So our challenge is not about getting people there or missing appointments. Our challenge is that when we do all this training, but we still have technicians who make some, we'll say, rudimentary mistakes. I'll paraphrase that. How do you solve for that? What can we talk about a little bit, like maybe our productivity tools?
Yeah, and I think this is probably a good slide to be talking about that. Obviously, again, we're not dealing with robots and completely seamless and automatic ways of distributing work. Ultimately, the workforce is made up of human beings, and mistakes do happen. I think importantly, when you are delivering services in the field and you're really thinking about customer service and the quality and the expectations of that service, the collection of data and the continuity of how that data gets collected and how work is delivered is really important. Making sure that they do have mobile technology, and looking at this slide, when we think about the completion of work, how can we make sure that we're eliminating mistakes or potentially even helping improve the overall continuity and consistency of how service is delivered by making sure that the workforce does have a really seamless way of tracking through the various tasks that they have to perform, the data that needs to be collected in the field, the interactions that need to happen with a customer, like collecting a signature or taking photos of an inspection or things like that. Making sure that everybody has the same and consistent level of technology and it's not paper-based and prone to error, I think is really important, and hopefully that goes a little way to answering that question, as well as talking about this slide that we're on at the moment.
And giving people that information like in the moment of service. For sure.
Right. I think real-time interaction and real-time capability of technology is increasingly important. We do recognize, and certainly here at Scheduler have technology to allow offline interaction for organizations that don't necessarily have cell coverage or phone coverage all the time. But real-time communication, again, between not only the scheduler and the worker in the field, but also your customer, is incredibly important to sort of driving that real-time, on-demand interaction that both customers and the workforce are expecting now.
Thank you. Thanks for that question. I hope you have a little more luck with your training in the future.
Absolutely. I think one of the added benefits to this process, when you're thinking about these 4 moments in the journey and how technology can potentially support that an amazing customer experience, is if you do use a seamless connected system to both manage your workforce, manage the work, manage the interactions of your customers, and ultimately the completion of work in the field, is that you are building this incredibly rich set of data around when things are happening, why they're happening, who they're happening for, who is doing them, and what happens whilst it's being done. That's an amazing set of data for customers to start, or organizations to start leveraging. And one thing that we've found, and this is why integration is such a big component of what we've always done as an organization into CRM and other business systems, is that you have all of these upstream impacts of data and downstream impacts of data. How that job gets initiated and how work gets initiated and how the workforce is controlled, whether it's a HR system or a CRM or a works management system flowing into these kind of tools. And then the downstream effect of tracking travel time and tracking the time that people started working and tracking the cost of that work. How can that impact other downstream technology like invoicing and financial systems as you move through? So that's, I guess, an added benefit of having a consistent system to manage this process. Obviously today we have been talking about the future work and these changing customer expectations and how to align those with the various sort of functional steps of delivering work in the field. But I'd be amiss of me not to talk about our company and our product. I am here to talk about Scheduler. It is an intelligent mobile workforce management platform. We're native and integrated with both Salesforce and ServiceNow, and we have our own standalone product where people don't need or don't necessarily care immediately about integration. But we focus on several core areas, and there's probably 4 pillars to the platform that we've built. The first is the management of the workforce itself. What is the makeup and how do you manage those people that work for your organization, whether they are full-time workers, part-time, casual, or contractors? What's important to know about them and their skills and abilities, the time off they have, the time that they're available to get work done, where they're located, and which geographies they work in. The second one is obviously the scheduling, management, and assignment of work itself, whether it's an automated scheduling process and the dispatch of that work, or whether it's somewhat more manual and multi-touch in your interaction with customers. The mobile execution of work and our mobile product that helps those members of the workforce in the field get work done really effectively and consistently. And finally, communication and collaboration across not only your workforce but also your customers.
So we've got one more question I wanted to get to. So this person asked, can you connect to CRM only? How would you connect to more than one system at a time?
Yeah, great question. Scheduler does have an open API, so although we have very deep integrations with certain systems of record and CRM applications like Salesforce.com and ServiceNow, you can use our API to interact and integrate with other systems as well. So we're happy to talk to you about our integration strategy and our API, whether that's something that you're looking to connect yourselves, but we also have a team that can help you with not only making some of those decisions, but also the work involved in connecting those tools through our API. So we've always had a pretty open approach and recognize, I think, that scheduling and workforce mobility is not an isolated function within a business. It is really important to think about the ways that these processes and technologies interact with other business systems and other business processes within organizations. I think to start wrapping this up, and as we think about the future work and your customer experiences and the technologies you might choose, it's really important to really think about the processes in your organization that you're trying to optimize. As I said, across that 105 million workers in the US by 2020, only or less than 10 million of those fit in that traditional field service, heavy industry, repair and telecommunications industries, whether you're upkeeping assets and repairing machinery and installing them. And there's definitely been for a long time a subset of technology that's catered towards that industry. Scheduler has always taken a much more open view and a greater level of flexibility, I think, around the many different ways that work is scheduled, managed, initiated, and controlled. And we love working with industries outside of that very traditional model in healthcare, financial services, cleaning companies and facility service companies, non-profits and community services. And when you're really thinking about these complex customer journeys, very complex workforce journeys and scheduling challenges, and ultimately, sometimes challenging and complex workforce operations in the field, I think it's always important to really answer that question in yourself. What are the processes that you're trying to optimize? And sometimes that isn't, asset management and inventory control. It is more centered on your customers and the journey of your workforce holistically.
Matt, thank you so much. I wanted to flag we've got about 2 minutes left, so last call for questions. I think we have answered most of the ones that have come in, but just wanted to give everyone the opportunity before we close to follow up on anything else.
Thanks very much. And while you are submitting those questions, if we do have time, love to encourage you to reach out to anyone on our team. We're more than happy to talk to you about how you're getting work done in the field today, how technology can help, how you can really answer this call of a changing customer base and a changing workforce, and how you can meet those expectations as well. You're more than welcome to reach out to me directly or anyone on my team, and we're always happy to provide insight and just listen to how you get work done.
Thank you so much, Matt. And you can absolutely learn more about Scheduler. You can contact me directly at mfrancis@scheduler.com if you have any questions about this webinar or anything else we do. Please check your inbox for an upcoming email from us with some additional information about mobile workforce management, and you can always visit us at scheduler.com. Thanks everyone so much, and thank you for the great questions today.